Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Hey, everybody, we're back with more Live from the Heartland, and it brings me a lot of pleasure to bring on another old pal, another person I met back in the organizing days in Uptown with Joint Community Union, and that would be Bob Lawson, who's been on this show numerous times. I try to get him on over and over to be our labor guy and fill us in on what's going on in the labor movement. Sometimes he goes for it, sometimes he doesn't. But most recently, just the other day, Bob sent me an article out of the blue from a magazine called Fast Company. And it's about the worst union busters of 2023. Goes on to say organized labor won major victories across the country this year, but that just inspired companies to fight back harder. And then it goes into most egregious examples. So I took this as a possible way to get Bob to come talk about that. And he agreed, and here he is. And how about, Bob, start off with some good things that happened in the labor movement this year. As much information as you want to lay on us, and then we'll go to some of the negative things and the challenges.
Yeah. Well, thanks. And Happy New Year. There has been a huge upsurge of union organizing, of people who don't have unions fighting to get unions. That's the most exciting thing that I've seen in the labor movement in a long time. That everything, I think there's like now, the huge numbers, 9,000 Starbucks workers have organized for a union. REI, I think there's 8 REI stores that have organized for a union. A big hospital, doctors are starting to organize for unions. As a country that as wealth and power inequality has increased, it's taken a little time for people to figure out that the power we have is to organize. So this organizing is going on in spheres all over the place. That university grad students, professors, in almost every sphere that people are organizing. And so that, to me, that is really exciting. And what happened with the United Auto Workers strike, which was very creative and showed that not only does organizing matter, but when you win, that you can win huge improvements in people's lives. That I remember when we were young, that in the time that the auto workers were negotiating with the big 3 auto companies, everyone would look in the paper every day or to find out how much of a wage increase they're going to get, because that set the standard for the society. And so when 30% of the workers were organized, it wasn't only organized workers that won the benefits, it was all the other workers as well who got benefits because the employers were trying to keep up. So the excitement is around the organizing, and it's not just the UAW that won big in their strike this year. The Kaiser healthcare workers did, the UPS workers did. And so, it's exciting, and it's exciting when you talk to particularly young people. And these days, almost everybody's young, according to me,
You're young to me, buddy.
That they understand how unfair the society is and how unfair the wage situation is. And we're not even talking about the, Uber drivers and so-called gig workers who, under the pathetic labor laws in the U.S., don't even have a right to form a union. And so the good news is that people are fighting back. People are learning how to be organizers in every aspect. And a lot of people who may not have the right to organize a union under the law are figuring out legislative ways to do it, where, home care workers are winning wage increases in some cities. People are winning, gig workers are winning wage increases. Other places, people are using their power, like I believe it was the state of Washington passed a law that employers are not allowed to have captive audience meetings. et cetera, et cetera. But you know, so that's the good news. There's a lot of momentum, a lot of optimism, a lot of people learning to organize, and a lot of people understanding the value of organization. And I think it's also opened eyes that the way the UAW did the strike and the way they projected themselves as, you know, we got to fight back. It's for the whole working class, et cetera, is all good news.
Well, we'll go into the UAW a little bit later. I want to do a quote from that article you sent me from the Fast Company magazine about the worst union busters in 2023. And they said, according to the Economic Policy Institute, employers spend $433 million per year on union avoidance consultants, outside specialists who are brought in and paid hundreds of dollars per hour to convince workers not to unionize. Talk a little bit about the challenges that the labor movement and people wanting a better deal in life are up against.
It's people haven't been through it, don't understand what a difficult situation people who don't have a union because the law is so weak. The law essentially says, and I have to give the National Labor Relations Board under Joe Biden, and particularly under the new general counsel, a lot of credit for trying to work within the law to strengthen it for workers. But essentially that employers can break the law at will with almost no penalties. For example, although it's illegal to fire somebody for organizing or discipline them, if somebody gets fired for organizing a union, maybe a couple years later, if they win their case, the employer has to put a letter up on the wall apologizing for firing the person, and maybe hire the person back. And the only back wages they get are wages that if they have another job, those wages are subtracted. So for a company that's trying to scare the workers, that they can fire somebody, and it's particularly for these big companies, but it's almost no penalty at all. And the other thing that I think people don't realize, and I can go into more detail about how the anti-union consultants work. They've been doing the same thing for decades. But the other thing, and I think that the article is getting at, and that a lot of people don't understand, is that employees winning a union election where they've said that they want a union, the majority of them vote to have a union. The federal government says, yes, you have a union, and the employer has an obligation to negotiate. There's nothing that says that the employer has an obligation to come to an agreement. And so the employer can stall, can lie, can do whatever they want. And at the end of the day, if they are convicted of not bargaining in good faith, which is what it's called under the law, the penalty is that they have to bargain in good faith. That's the only penalty they face for not bargaining in good faith. So the typical play and what you see going on at Starbucks, at Amazon, it looks like at REI, et cetera, is that the employer stalls and stalls and stalls. With high turnover, a lot of the leaders leave, or they continue to harass the leaders, or people get demoralized. Then after a year, the employees, quote, have a right to have what's called a decertification election, which is to get rid of the union. And surprisingly enough, that quite often, after the employer has stalled for a year and brought in people that it selects, that they have decertification campaigns. So it takes the union resources again to fight another campaign to win that election, and then the penalty for the employer for having lost that election is that it has to bargain in good faith again. So I don't know, I forget what the latest figure is, but it used to be something like only 50% of the unions that won elections ever got first contracts. Hopefully that's going to change because there'll be much more public support and so on. But ultimately, to have a fairer society, we're going to have to change the labor laws in this country. That's not on the horizon now. So what we have to do is just support the workers in these campaigns for a first contract.
Let's go back to United Auto Workers because they certainly set the standard, it seems like, and they've talked about Sean Finn, who was a kind of the opposition candidate within the union, and he won. And he's been really out there, and he's been very good. He's talked about going after Tesla and some of even the big three plants in the South. Now, you are actually a veteran of some of that organizing in the South. Why don't you talk a little bit about the UAW and the plan going forward and the hurdles that they face?
I have to say I don't exactly know the plan of the UAW going forward, which is a good thing that people don't actually know the plan. But the general theory, and this is different from because of the climate we're in now, and because of the amount of momentum they created and the anger that people have about the wealth inequality, is that in the past, that because of the labor laws, et cetera, that it's been very difficult and slow moving to organize one factory at a time. And that gives the anti-union consultants and employers a chance to scare the hell out of people, as they did in the South. They get elected officials to speak against it, et cetera. So what it seems to me from the outside that they're doing is capitalizing on this momentum that they got from winning this great contract. And the way they won the contract was very smart, involving the members at every single stage of the campaign. So with that, the non-union workers are looking to the UAW and saying, hey, if they can get this, we can. Because what happened is right after the UAW won, all the employers, non-union employers, started giving their employees big raises. And the reason they did that is so they can say, well, you don't need a union. Look what we did. And they go through all this BS. We're family, blah, blah, blah. They're just going to take your money. So what it looks like the UAW is trying to do is, in a different way than they've been doing, is to just allow or urge the workers to self-organize and to go for an election as quickly as they can. But in union elections, the theory is, in the operating theory, is the law says you have to get 30% of the employees to sign authorization cards to have an election. That you almost never win an election with employer opposition if you get 30%. So the UAW and most unions that have had successful campaigns get 70% to sign authorization cards. That indicates that the union is something that the overwhelming majority of the people want. It means they've been able to build a good organization inside the company so people feel represented, et cetera, et cetera. So it looks like they're trying to do a lot of really fast self-organizing, doing trainings for worker leaders, et cetera. It's much more difficult to organize a big plant than it is, say, a small Starbucks, et cetera. And there's much more ability for the anti-union consultants hired by the company and the managers to play games with people, to pit people against each other, to pit departments against each other, et cetera. So it's kind of an open question whether this strategy is going to work or not. I'm really hopeful that it will. But
how different is it from when, as I believe you worked on the attempts to organize Nissan down in the South somewhere? And
I was distant worked on it, but that it's completely different. Because of the public nature of the UAW fight to get their contract, they're making this a public fight from the very beginning. And it's seen as a much more of a movement than just as a one-off organizing. The question that I have and that other people have is, are they going to have the sort of the skills and patience internally to be able to self-organize to stand up against the employer campaign? And will this be enough to withstand the public pressure? In the past, the UAW has tried, in my opinion, did it way under-resourced, did not devote nearly enough resources and staff time to training internal member organizers to own the campaign, and that did not have sort of the public political clout to make workers feel protected. And one of the major problems in the South in particular is that a lot of these auto jobs are better than any other jobs around, even though they still, workers are injured, they're stressful, they're still underpaid, the companies are still making billions of dollars, but compared to looking around, so they play on that a lot. So
I'm going to go back a little bit, back to the article, and another quote in the article was, "Not every employer puts up a fight when their workers move to unionize. The American Federation of Labor Congress Industrial Organizations, that's the AFL-CIO, a federation of 60 national and international labor unions representing 12.5 million working people, reached an agreement with Microsoft in which the software giant agreed to remain neutral if any of its workers decide to unionize. This is good news for the workers in the burgeoning tech sector and places Microsoft in a sharp contrast to most of its peers. Other tech titans like Amazon, Alphabet, and Tesla have fought tooth and nail to either defeat their own workers' union drives or scare them out of even considering signing a union card." Any thoughts on that?
Well, when the National Labor Relations Act, which governs the way unions are formed in the U.S., was originally conceived and passed in the 40s, that the idea was that whether or not to have a union would be decided by the workers themselves, not about the company versus the workers. It was whether the workers wanted it. The company's role was to be neutral and couldn't interfere. Over the years, the law has changed and the interpretation has changed to allow companies to fight the union like crazy. That the neutrality agreement that Microsoft signed, and hopefully they'll live up to it, is extremely rare these days. Ben and Jerry's ice cream did one as well. That the goal always is to ask employers to say, stay out of this, let us decide, and so on. So it's a really good thing that Microsoft did it. I hope they live up to it, and I hope the employees take advantage of it. But it should be the goal of community organizations, of churches, of everybody that wants a more just society, to urge employers to stay out of this. This is the employees' business, whether they want to form a union. Most employees want to do a good job. They also want to be able to make a living. And so it's in the benefit of society for the wealth gap and for the wealth gap and the income gap to be closed. And the unions are the only, if not best vehicle for doing that.
Bob, let's go look forward a little bit. When I was growing up, going backwards, I always thought of as the working people were for the Democrats and were for unions. It's not quite that clear and simple, but we do think that labor is generally on a more progressive bent than certainly the Republicans. And I'm wondering what you think the role of labor will be in the upcoming election in November, as well as what you think we ought to be doing now getting ready for that election.
Well, I suspect that organized labor will be endorsing Biden. Some have already. Um, I hope, which I don't know, is that that means that unions internally will begin doing a lot of political education so they can mobilize their members and not just donate money to TV ads. That the one of the reasons that so much of the Midwest used to be, a progressive place was because there were unions, and unions are a way that working people get political education and learn about what's going on, as opposed to looking at Fox News or MSNBC or something. So I'm hoping that unions do that in a one-on-one basis with their membership. Whether they will or not, I don't know. I know that some of the young, new young people who are organizing um, have are going to do that, and so on. But that's what I hope they do, because there's a huge resource of people, there's organizers, etc. And I hope it doesn't become an either or between union organizing versus working on politics, which sometimes it has in unions. Um, but I think they go hand in hand, and they should continue to do that. Um, I think that people just need to understand that this is a long-term fight, and that there's going to be two choices for president. One is a fascist, and so labor organizing and any hope of a revitalization will go away if Trump is elected again. That Biden's done some good things for unions. He's in a difficult situation. I think about Lyndon Johnson. Those of us who are old enough think about Lyndon Johnson, and part of the way with LBJ led to Nixon. So I just hope that people can understand that there's going to be one of two people elected president, and it'll make a huge difference as far as whether we can build a progressive movement in the future.
Bob, in a minute or so we have left, we started off, I started off the show talking about both you and Steve Goldsmith being compatriots, partners, and pals, comrades in Joint Community Union. In my new book on Rising Up Angry, you have a piece at the end about things you learned from uh, Joint Community Union. Why don't you just talk a little bit about, as we go out, about being an organizer, some of the things you learned and were inspired by?
Well, being an organizer is great because you get to learn about all kinds of people, and you get to join together with people who many you would never run into in your normal life if you weren't an organizer, and go through life-changing events with them. The feeling of people who go through a union campaign, or winning a rent strike, or winning a strike with a union, all of those things are like both life altering for the individuals, as well as making material improvements in people's lives. And for an organizer to be able to experience that, and to be able to get to know people all over the place, and have that deep connection with them in struggle for something better and bigger than ourselves, is a real privilege. And so I think being an organizer is great, and I'm lucky that I got to do it, and happy.
Well, I'm glad we've gotten to run into each other a lot over the years. You do inspire me a lot, Bob. I want to share that with you, and I'm very grateful to have been your coworker, your partner, your comrade in a couple of organizations. And